In this video, we will thoroughly examine a topic that is frequently discussed among Muslims and heavily criticized by atheist circles. Our topic is verse 88 of Surah An-Naml, and the question of whether this verse actually contains a scientific miracle. Many Muslims present this verse as one of the scientific miracles of the Qur'an because it mentions that mountains move like the movement of clouds. According to modern geology, the continents on which mountains rest are indeed in motion, shifting by a few centimeters every year. Now the real question is, could someone living in the deserts of Arabia 1,400 years ago have known this? If the Qur'an revealed this information back then, could it be considered evidence of a divine message? That's exactly what we will unpack today. We will also discuss the strengths and weaknesses of the atheist objections with complete honesty. Let's start by looking at the verse itself. In Surah An-Naml, verse 88, Allah says, approximate meaning, "You see the mountains, thinking they are solid and motionless, but they move like the movement of clouds. This is the flawless artistry of Allah." There are three key points in this verse. Contrary to appearance, the mountains are actually in motion. Their movement is compared to the movement of clouds. And most importantly, this phenomenon is described as part of Allah's artistry. From this, some Muslims argue that the verse refers to the movement of tectonic plates. The scientific theory we now know governs the motion of continents. Today, it is a well-established fact that continents shift roughly 2 to 3 centimeters per year, causing earthquakes, mountain formation, and volcanic activity. But atheist critics argue, no, this is not about continental drift. The verse clearly talks about the mountains themselves moving, not the continents. Trying to twist the meaning to fit scientific discoveries is forced and misleading. At first glance, this seems like a reasonable objection, but when you consider the Qur'an as a whole, the picture changes. For example, in Surah An-Naml, verse 32, Allah says, "And He firmly established the mountains." The Arabic verb used here is arsa, derived from irsa, which originally describes how a ship anchors itself in water. So the mountains are anchored to the earth, much like a ship anchors in the sea. But here's the subtle point. An anchored ship is not absolutely motionless. It can drift slightly, sway with the waves, but it generally stays within its zone. In the same way, the Qur'an describes the mountains as being fixed in place, yet they participate in the Earth's broader movement in a metaphorical sense. Scientifically, we know that most mountain ranges are connected to the movement of Earth's tectonic plates. As the plates move, the mountains, though appearing stationary to the human eye, also move. So when the Qur'an refers to the movement of mountains, it implicitly includes the movement of the land they rest upon. In this sense, even though the verse does not explicitly mention tectonic plates, it indirectly points to that scientific reality. Now let's address another common objection. Some atheists claim that this verse describes the day of judgment, not a scientific reality, making the whole discussion irrelevant. They argue that if you read the surrounding verses, the context is clearly apocalyptic. Yes, context matters. If we look at the verses before and after, they do reference the blowing of the trumpet and the day of reckoning. But notice verse 86. "Did they not see that we made the night for them to rest in and the day bright?" This is clearly referring to worldly life, not the afterlife. In other words, the Qur'an often transitions between discussing worldly phenomena and the hereafter in a poetic, interconnected style. That's part of its unique literary approach. Moreover, the phrase "this is Allah's artistry" in verse 88 points not to a scene of destruction, but to an ongoing, systematic creation. In the Qur'an, artistry, san'at, usually refers to a beautiful, structured, and continuous act of creation. For example, in Surah Hud, verse 37, Allah commands Noah to build the ark, using the term san'at, emphasizing craftsmanship, construction, and process, not destruction. Here's another linguistic nuance. When other verses talk about mountains moving during the day of judgment, the Arabic verbs used are often sayyara, implying a violent, radical change. But in Surah An-Naml, verse 88, the word mara is used, which implies a smooth, continuous, gentle motion, exactly like how clouds drift. Clouds move softly, almost imperceptibly, yet they are constantly changing position. The comparison is intentional and precise. Some critics claim ancient Greeks, Hindus, or other civilizations also said mountains move, but there is no strong historical evidence for this. So far, no ancient text has clearly or scientifically stated that mountains move as we understand today. And even if such claims existed, the Qur'an presents this concept accurately, precisely, and without the mythological errors common in ancient beliefs. Remember, at the time, the dominant ideas were that the earth was flat, mountains were static, or the earth rested on the back of giant creatures. Myths with no basis in scientific reality. If the Qur'an had repeated those myths, today critics would say, look, the Qur'an contains scientific errors. But the Qur'an avoids all those myths, providing statements that align with modern science without error. To summarize, when evaluated both linguistically and within the broader Quranic context, Surah An-Naml, verse 88, offers a remarkably precise description that indirectly corresponds with modern knowledge about the Earth's dynamic structure and tectonic movement. Of course, this won't forcibly convince those who reject faith, but for open-minded individuals, it's a powerful detail worth reflecting upon. If you want this kind of content to reach more people, don't forget to share the video and support the channel. Thank you for watching.